That
before
is
they
hilarious.
were ready. But then Jen had like.
Hi, and welcome to Book Talk. I'm your host, Brian Nixon. Joining me on my broadcast is my co-host and fellow book lover, Tiffany Rockhold.
Hello.
If it's not obvious to you folks, we are dressed the same. We are otherwise known as the Bobbsey twins. So I walked in this morning to touch base with you, right, Tiffany?
Yes,
Just
you
say,
did. You walked
hey,
into my office.
always touching base about the broadcast. And I go, oh my goodness.
And I just started laughing.
We are
as
dressed very similar.
Realized.
I'm not in a dress. Let's just be. I'm not in a dress. But
No.
and let's clarify this. This is actually dark navy.
Yours is navy and mine
and
is
yours
black.
is black. So they're not exactly.
But
the
we
same.
realized you can't tell that.
Yeah, and we've got another surprise. Tiffany actually has a rapper name.
Oh.
Back in her earlier career as a big shot in Nashville, she went by T-Rock. So if you want to just email a question in, just email specifically to T-Rock because she'll answer to that name.
Well, Brian, yes, we were talking about rapper names right before this, thanks to Instagram filters. And Brian, what's your rapper name?
I
You were
too
given
have
a rapper name here.
First year of teaching at the School of Ministry here, I was given the name B. Nix. So if you want to say, hey, B. Nix or hey, T-Rock,
B. Nixon T-Rock.
that's us as well. Or you could say the Bobbsey twins. Any of that will go good.
You might have to explain the Bobbsey twins.
Yeah, the
to
Bobbsey
some
twins
people.
are an old series of books based way back in the 50s and 60s. They were very popular with smaller kids, and they were twins, of course. Well, today we are going to do something a little bit differently.
We are.
And that's because the book that is part of the Book and Brew, which is Joel Rosenberg's The Jerusalem Assassin, is a novel. And we didn't want to go chapter by chapter through this wonderful book and spoil it for you.
No.
Because there's nothing worse than you tuning into a broadcast and then we tell you everything
Tell you
that's
the
going to
ending.
happen and then tell you the ending.
You wouldn't want to read it then.
They wouldn't want to read it.
We would be in trouble.
And we want you to read this book. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the importance of reading fiction, because this is a novel. This is our first novel we've discussed here on Book Talk. And then we're going to talk about the importance of Jerusalem. So we are going to be referencing aspects of this book, but we're going to expand it a little bit more to talk specifically about the city of Jerusalem.
And we're going to be talking about that because if you've read any of Joel's previous books before this one, you'll find that a lot of the books deal with things that take place in Jerusalem. And so that's why we are going to hit on that. And this is actually part 3 in a series of books that he has. So this isn't even the first one. So you'll definitely want to pick up the whole series, actually.
Yeah, definitely so. And before we jump into why should we even be reading fiction, and then moving to the book itself, we've got to thank our sponsors. Of course, Solomon's Porch is the group that supplies the coffee. And Josh over at Solomon Porch, who does a lot of the roasting, said this week's brew is the Wanderer's Blend, and it's bold, deep, has a sense of cocoa and black cherry. And I know nothing what that means because I'm a tea drinker, but I'm sure it's really tasty. Good. I'm sure it's really good.
I promise.
And then, of course, Parchment's Bookstore supplies all of the books. We have our silent partner, Daniel Aragon, who's off to the side. He will be fielding your questions. So if you have a question, as we've told you before, this is an interactive program. You could either get on Facebook Live, you could get on Calvary Church at Home, and you could email a question, and we will try to answer those questions. Or if you just want to participate with some of the joking that we have going on, please join us. But we are live on Facebook, Calvary Church at Home, and Instagram
right here.
So you can join in any of those scenarios and go from there. So, Tiffany, first part of this program.
Yes.
It is about the importance of reading. And I've brought some extra books here that I'm going to be supplementing throughout this broadcast.
Same.
But one book I didn't bring is by a gentleman by the name of Christopher Smith. And he points out that why Christians should be reading is for 3 major reasons. Because the church should be a learning organization, and we can learn both with fiction and nonfiction, of course. 2, when we read together, it's a type of community. So we are participating in a community when we're reading together, and that applies to both fiction and nonfiction.
Which is what we're trying to help cultivate here.
That's exactly right.
With this.
And then thirdly, he says, reading can teach us to be like Jesus. And I found that to be interesting. So I pursued that a little bit more.
Yes, you did.
And I found an article by a lady by the name of Courtney Selter. Courtney, thank you for writing your article. But she gave 9 reasons to read specifically fiction. And I thought, okay, so Christopher Smith is saying reading could help us become more like Jesus. And then on the other hand, I get something from Courtney Selter, and I'm comparing, contrasting this. So here's the number 1 reason Courtney says that we should be reading, is that it helps us empathize with characters.
Absolutely.
And I go, that's a lot like Jesus, to have compassion and empathy. So when you're reading a book, you could either empathize with the protagonist or go, oh boy, I'm not liking this guy in here. But it really helps us see the human condition.
Absolutely.
Her number 2 reason is it's an effective thing against stress. So it's disengagement. It allows you to kind of separate yourself from a stressful moment and to, engage in a different world. Okay. Number 3, according to Courtney Selter, is it helps you sleep better. Jesus slept. It even says so in the scripture. Jesus slept. And so I guess, it's more like Jesus there.
Yeah.
The 4th reason Courtney Selter gives is improved relationships. It's a reality stimulator. We get to kind of, if you will, peep into other people's life and say, oh, look how they're living. So I guess it could help improve your relationships with others.
That's good.
And maybe if you're reading a bad book, it would not help in that way. But, and then she says, number 5th reason why reading fiction is important is it helps your memory. Readers, apparently research-wise, tells you readers have less decline in their memory, which I found interesting.
Oh, good.
Number 6th reason is stories open up your mind. So stories, and of course we know with Joel Rosenberg's, it does. It opens up your mind to a different world, to Jerusalem, espionage, intrigue going on around the world.
Assassination plots.
That's right. Number 7 reason, according to Courtney Seltzer, is it builds a better language. Your vocabulary is improved.
Yes.
Number 8 is it helps creative thinking, so your creativity thrives. And number 9, it improves your mood. Apparently there's some studies out there that says the more you read, particularly nonfiction or fiction, it can improve your mood.
Oh, that's so good.
So these are some reasons why people read. But then we turned to Mr. C.S. Lewis himself. And
These are
Parchments,
some of my favorites.
Yeah. Parchments does carry this book as well. This is C.S. Lewis's The Reading Life. This book is not the one that you would get part of Book and Brew. Again, the Joel Rosenberg is the book that you would get for discount. But we're referencing a few books that Parchments does carry. And they do carry The Reading Life by C.S. Lewis. And so C.S. Lewis in this book also talks about the importance of reading. And so his number 1, Tiffany, is why we read, to be more than ourselves. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
How does reading help you become more than yourself?
Gosh, well, like the 9 other items that you mentioned earlier, you get to grow in a new capacity. You get to learn more about so many other people. So then you get to almost transplant yourself into another world.
That's right.
As well, which I know sometimes for me it helps to remove myself from the here and now for a little while.
Speaking of, just give me a sense of the first time you read Chronicles of Narnia, keeping on the C.S. Lewis theme.
Yeah,
I mean,
gosh.
Weren't you blown away that these kids go through a closet and
Yes, well, and I think because I read it at such a young age, now anytime I see certain types of closets in the way that they're formed, I wish I could go through that closet and go into Narnia.
Yeah, totally. So not only did C.S. Lewis introduce us to a new world via Narnia, but we were also introduced to the world of those children, 4 children.
Absolutely.
And so it really does open up new worlds. So C.S. Lewis, number 2, is literature is a window. So it's a series of windows and even doors. So how has literature been a window for you?
Oh gosh, I love we get a glimpse into other people's lives, even though they're fake, they're fake characters. We just get a glimpse into other people's lives, and as you stated earlier, we get to see how other people view things, and then go, gosh, well, if I were in that situation, how would I handle that? Or, gosh, they didn't handle that well. I'm going to bookmark that. So if I'm ever in that situation, I don't respond in that manner, and so forth. Yeah.
So you brought some books, also from Parchments. Thank you for Parchments.
I have, because all of my favorite books are in Tennessee still.
Using some of these books that you brought today, tell us how they opened up windows. I mean, again, some of these are some of your favorite books.
They are.
But just really talk to us about how they open up new worlds to you.
Sure, absolutely. So I love one of the things that C.S. Lewis says. In love we escape from ourselves into one another, in love, in virtue, in the pursuit of knowledge, and in the reception of the arts, and that literary experience can help heal the wounds. And that makes me think of this book right here. It's called Redeeming Love, and here it is for Instagram. So this is by Francine Rivers, and it is available in Parchments. This, if you ask me, the desert island question of if you can only take one book with you besides the Bible, what would you take? It's this book for me. This book it's based on the book of Hosea in the Bible, but it shows God's relentless love for us. And I know it's more geared towards females, but I also know many males who have read it and love it as well. So for me, this book shows me it is one of those books that I will read over and over and over again. And it just continues to show me how God can redeem any situation. Even if we have gone back so many times and done the exact same sin over and over and over, His love for us never changes. And so it honestly helps re-emphasize what the Bible tells us about God's love. But we get to see it in a different set of characters.
A fiction. And that's what it opened up a world in a whole new way.
Yes,
in
absolutely.
A whole new way.
We have a question.
Yeah, we do have a question. We have a question from Teresa W. And Teresa is asking, will there be another book after Joel Rosenberg's? And yes, there will.
And we'll be excited to tell you about it.
We're going to tell you about it at the end of the program, because I'm very excited about our next book. Very excited. But Teresa, thanks for tuning in, and thanks for asking your question. So what's another book that you have, Tiffany, that has opened up different worlds?
This one is a classic. I love this one. It's Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. And this one, it's 4 sisters dealing with everyday life as they're growing up. I can't remember the time period is a really long time ago, but I don't remember the exact time period. Their father is gone and serving, and so it's primarily the four daughters and their mom. And I just love that it paints the picture of childhood. Yep. You get to see how these 4 sisters live amongst each other, but they also have integrity, and they show that. And I love that. And it just takes you back to a different time period as well. And sometimes I wish I kind of lived during these time periods where we got to wear really beautiful dresses a lot.
Well, I wouldn't want to wear a really beautiful dress,
but I
just
do.
for the record.
So
again, opened up another world of history.
Absolutely.
It opened up. And then you brought a third book.
And then another one, Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility. I'm a hopeless romantic.
It's all right. It's good.
Yeah, and I'm maybe not hopeless, but I kind of don't like that phrase sometimes. But I am a romantic, and I love books like that. I love books that show how I believe that both men and women should be like in relationships, you know. And I love seeing the pursuit that happens in books like this. Not just this one, but there's so many others.
Sure.
So those are some of mine. What about yours?
Man, I guess what began here's the funny thing, Tiffany. When I was younger, I did not read fiction. I was
Really?
Oh yeah, I read, it was history or science. I was completely enamored by fact, if you will. But then something happened my sophomore into my junior year. I started to read, and I really attribute it to my English professor, Mr. Chamberlain, in San Jose, California. And he just started to open up a world of literature to me, and then I just started to read. So I attribute my conversion to fiction, if you will, was John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men, Ernest Hemingway's, what do you think? Come on. What Ernest Hemingway is every junior, sophomore kid reading? Old Man in the Sea.
I was going to see if anybody said it.
Yeah. And so, and then, believe it or not, Catcher in the Rye. About this wandering youth, wandering the streets of New York and just trying to, figure out who he was. And I realized that like you did with these books, those books opened up different worlds. They gave me a perspective into, in the case of Catcher in the Rye, though it had some swear words in it, it's like this kid is dealing with stuff that I think all teenagers are dealing with.
Absolutely.
Of Mice and Men, I lived in Northern California at the time, and it was set in Northern California, so it really resonated with me. And then the biblical symbolism, of course, in Old Man the Sea. He gets out, he falls 7 times like Christ falls 7 times. And I began to see the profound nature of literature. So I would count those 3 guys kind of the guys that helped, convert me, if you will, to fiction.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and so fiction, even though I still read mostly nonfiction to this day, I always try to put in a fiction book, at least 2 a year. I try to do 2 fiction books a year, and so it is a good practice that we should do.
It is.
So we're going to keep moving on with the C.S. Lewis book.
Yes.
And I'm gonna quiz Tiffany. So if you're watching, pay close attention, because you're a true reader, according to C.S. Lewis, if you do these 4 things. So, according to C.S. Lewis, you're a true reader if. So, Tiffany, number 1, you love to reread books.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I have reread books.
She's a true reader.
Many times.
What's funny is I will reread nonfiction books, but I won't reread fiction books. So C.S. Lewis, if you were here, am I a true reader? I don't know.
Interesting.
But I will read
I mean, my family knows if I'm moving, which I've been in the midst of the last few months, I have the hardest time parting with books.
Yeah, me too.
Because I've seen your office. I'm pretty sure he has more than me, and that was a surprise to me. But I have a hard time parting with books because they hold such a special place in my heart, and they've taught me something, or something has been happening in my own life during that time period, and I went to that book. You know?
I recently reread John Stott's Balanced Christianity, and I read it years ago, and I thought I just need to reread this because there was something in there that I was sharing with someone, so I reread the book again, and I will always find myself going back to certain books and glean from them again.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess we're both true readers.
You would be,
Okay, number 2.
Okay.
You know if you're a true reader if you highly value reading as an activity.
Absolutely.
You actually sit down and love the whole ambiance of reading.
Oh, yes.
So set the stage of what it's like when you're about to read a book.
This might be a little bit personal, but I and my family would absolutely attest to this. I love to read books in a really hot bathtub.
Nice.
In a relaxing bath.
I would see here. I'm just gonna be honest. I'd be afraid I would drop the book in the water and then I'd ruin it.
It's maybe happened a few times.
Okay. See, she's a book killer.
Then I take it out really quick.
And she dries it off with the hairdryer. Yeah. So for me,
And you?
I have books spread throughout my house. So
I'm sure. I bet. Yeah.
everyone who knows me knows this, that when it comes to book reading, I'm a little too intense. So I just don't read one book. I'll read multiple books at once.
Same.
And I literally will read a chapter, put it down, go to the next. So one time I was with my son and someone says, well, Brian, I mean, really, come in. How many books do you really read at once? And I'm like, oh, I don't know, maybe 10. And my son goes, it's not 10. And I'm like, oh, it's not much more than that. He goes upstairs. I had 60 books stacked just on around my nightstand.
Oh my gosh.
And then I have 4 areas where I read from. So I have another room, and there's usually 3 or 4 books there. I have one in the front room because if there's a commercial on TV, I'll pick up a book and read in between.
That's amazing. All right, my family and roommates, you can't say anything about me at all now because my space isn't like that.
Yeah,
I mean, I do have a stack
I get in
of books
trouble.
on my dresser for sure. I have 6 books right now
I get in trouble.
that are on my dresser.
My poor wife, Melanie. Another book came in the mail today, Brian. Don't you have enough? Did you finish the last one? It's an addiction. I'm sorry. So we meet it.
Okay,
we
so
value
the
reading
second
as
one.
an activity.
Yes, okay.
Number 3, according to C.S. Lewis, you know you're a true reader if lists the reading of particular books as life-changing experiences.
Yes.
Can you name
Yes.
a life-changing book?
Yes, absolutely.
You just did, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Redeeming Love. Life-changing book. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I have given this book as a gift to people, I don't even know how many times over the years, because it's been that influential in my life.
Yeah. I know for me, I've had several books that were life-changing. I think early on, when my mother first read us The Chronicles of Narnia, that was life-changing. I mean, that just stuck with you as a kid. And then, in middle school, like I said, I was reading more, nonfiction works. But as I pointed out, in high school, the 3 books
Then
I
you
mentioned,
started-
for fiction, they were life-changing books. They
Yeah.
really got me, going in fiction. So, yeah, books are life-changing. Okay? And then 4th,
Okay, 4.
you know if you're a true reader if you continuously reflect and recall what you've read.
Yes.
All the time.
All the time.
Yeah, all the time. I mean, obviously, I deal with books. As part of my job is I oversee Pastor Skip's books. But I find myself always referring back to books I've read or I'm currently reading, and I'm always trying to implement them in my thought process and daily life.
Same.
Okay?
Absolutely.
So we're true readers. Hopefully you're true readers as well. All right. last thing from C.S. Lewis, and then we're going to conclude our time on the importance of reading and switch it over to Jerusalem. So C.S. Lewis says the importance of reading. Why is, and one of the major things he says the importance of reading is because it brings you to different times. You could time travel through reading fiction. So, as you said, with Jane Austen, you're going back to Victorian and earlier eras. Through Francine Rivers, you're even going back, biblical times in the 1800s and so on and so forth. So it helps you go back and understand the day and age which you live.
Absolutely.
So, and I don't mean that just in the sense that the book itself takes place in that particular time. But let's say you pick up an author, let's say Charles Dickens, and you read A Christmas Carol, though he's not trying to go back in time, you get a sense of the time in which he was writing.
Absolutely.
You learn about that time.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
C.S. Lewis is so right. So
and
right.
Now that you said Dickens, now I really want to go watch.
See, I spoiled.
I really want to go watch
Dickens.
that movie.
All right.
Watch A Christmas Carol.
So that was the first part of our book talk, where we were talking about the importance of reading, and we had some help. The second part, as we've addressed, is we're going to now use Joel Rosenberg's The Jerusalem Assassin as the segue. Of course, this is a work of fiction, and Joel Rosenberg, in the end of his book, actually makes that point, and Tiffany's going to address that at the very end of our broadcast. But he makes the point that this is a work of fiction. He's not trying to be prophetic or anything else. But at the same time, everything we just talked about applies to this book. It gives you insight into a particular time. It builds up intrigue. It lets you get into the character of another person. And so the character of this book is a fellow by the name of Marcus Riker. And his whole career is studying killers. His job is to study killers. And what he knows is that there's a peace summit coming, and he recognized that it's the prime time for an assassin to show up on the scene. So Marcus Riker knows all of this is going on, and the book really follows the President of the United States, who in this book is called Andrew Clark, and they're coming to this historic peace setting, and let's just say things start getting out of control very quickly. Like most of Joel Rosenberg's books, it's a page turner. You want to know what's going on. You go, no, I'll just read one more chapter. No, I'm just going to read one more chapter. But this is how it's read. Listen to this. President Andrew Clark is determined to announce his historic peace plan for the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. But when senior American officials who support the plan begin violently dying, Clark orders Riker and his team of CIA operatives to hunt down those responsible and bring the killing spree to an end. When the Palestinians denounce the American plan, the Saudis signal they may be ready to forge a historic treaty with Israel. Could the Saudi kings support the missing ingredient that will lead the peace to long last? Riker soon uncovers a chilling plot to kill the American president. And we're going to leave it at that, because you're going to have to read the book. As we said, if we start to delve into this, we're going to spoil it for you, and then you're not going to like us. You need to read this work of fiction for the reasons we just mentioned.
Well, and has anybody ever spoiled a book for you before?
Yes.
Now that I think about that?
They've spoiled books, they've spoiled movies, and it's terrible. Yeah, someone goes, or like they're talking about it like by the water cooler, and then they say the ending. It's like, I don't want to see the movie now. I know the ending.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're not going to do that to you with this book.
We don't want to do that.
But what we do want to do is we want to talk a little bit about the importance of Jerusalem, the city, because much of Joel's book takes place in Jerusalem. As a matter of fact, let's just use chapter 68 as an example. It'll start off Jerusalem, Israel. So a lot of the book actually takes place in Jerusalem.
And it's where he lived. He actually lives.
Joel live
lives
in Jerusalem
Israel.
now. He left the United States and he lives in Israel. So to really help frame the importance of Jerusalem, particularly as a geographical center, I would say you could get the Harvest Handbook of Bible Lands by Stephen Collins and Joseph Holden. Steve Collins actually is a friend of our church here in Albuquerque, and Joseph Holden is the president of Veritas International University. But they did an amazing section on Jerusalem as a historic entity, and they give you maps and everything else of that nature. So let me just highlight. Oh, and by the way, Parchments does carry this book as well, the Harvest Handbook of Bible Lands. So let me just give you some interesting facts about Jerusalem. Jerusalem is situated on the southern spur of a plateau in the Judea Mountains, which includes the Mount of Olives. Does that ring a bell?
A little bit.
And the elevation of the old city is approximately 760 meters. That's roughly 2,550 feet. So higher than sea level, but not as high as we are here in New Mexico. We're at about 5,500 feet in Albuquerque. And the whole of Jerusalem is surrounded by valleys and dry riverbeds. It's one of the oldest cities in the world. Jerusalem has a storied history with settlements going back over 7,000 plus years. So it's been settled a long time. And here's some other interesting facts. The earliest signs of settlement in the city arises around the time of David, when he captured this small town, but it was already a settlement years before that. Meaning, Jerusalem is really old, period. Our friend Daniel Aragon, who's our silent partner, he just got back from Jerusalem not too long ago. And Joel's book takes place in a very old setting, but he brings modern new components to it. You know, the whole new, you know, it's the old and the new mix in a fascinating way. But Jerusalem is not just important as a historical thing, it's also important for prophecy.
Absolutely. Well, and I had a question. Have you been to Jerusalem?
I've never been to Jerusalem.
You haven't? Okay.
I live vicariously through people that have been through Jerusalem.
Okay.
Have you been to Jerusalem?
I have, but
so tell us about your experience.
It's been a while. This
all
was
right.
in 2001. I was 19.
That's not too long
So it's
ago.
almost 20 years. But still, I remember when people who had been, when they would try to describe what it was like going to Jerusalem, they would say that the closest thing they could tell you was that it felt like you were home. And I remember feeling that when we first, for our trip, when we first got into Jerusalem, we went up to an overlook that just looked across the city, and we prayed over the city, had communion there, and I remember Pastor Skip just pointing out different areas of the city so we would start to learn the layout. And honestly, I didn't want to leave because it did.
What were some of the highlights? Like what stuck out of you? By the way, I'm going to do something a little unusual. I'm going to ask a third member of our silent partner to reveal himself. Daniel, come on the set. Come on the set because
Yes,
you just got back there. And since we're talking about Jerusalem, and I'm at the distinct disadvantage of not being
Yeah, come on, here
there.
you go.
So you guys start talking about, like, what were some of the things that stand out about Jerusalem to you?
Oh, multiple things. I think one of the biggest things for me, one of the most memorable things for me, was the food. The food is spectacular. It's amazing food, and the people are fantastic. They're super generous, super nice. I don't think I had one bad conversation or bad interaction with anybody.
So wait, hold on. Go back to the food. I'm hungry, obviously. So what made it so good? What was it like?
So they have
fresh.
why don't you talk about some of the food?
Well, you were
it's fantastic.
just it is. It's so fresh. I remember lots of fruits and vegetables, and also really good breads. Remember that.
Breads.
Olive oil.
Olive
tons of
oil, yes.
True, olive
We learned
oils.
how to make bread.
Yeah. Dates.
Was
Dates
it like
are
the
really good.
pita bread where you scoop into the hummus?
Yeah.
Into the
Yes.
hummus, yeah, it's fantastic.
I'm hungry. Okay, so the food. Now let's go to the people. What made the people so engaging?
They're just so warm and welcoming. There's different cultures. You have things such as a cold culture and a warm culture. Israel is very much a warm culture, for sure. The people are so welcoming. Almost everyone you talk to, they want to just invite you into their house and have a Shabbat dinner for you, and just bring you in, and they kind of just treat you as one of their own, and so it's very great.
Yeah, Tiffany, what was your impression of the people?
Same. So kind and so helpful. I remember that. We didn't feel like we were a burden, at all. Because I know when you're traveling some places you feel like you shouldn't be there.
Right.
But it was completely opposite in Israel. I felt very peaceful.
Okay,
there.
so the food, the people, and then the sights. I mean, let's come on. Most people go to Israel for the sights.
Yeah.
So each of you start thinking about your favorite sites, but I want you to tell me the favorite site, what it is, and why it was important to you. Let's start with you, Daniel.
Yeah, I would say by far the Jordan River. If you've never been baptized, it's one thing to be baptized here, but a completely different thing to be baptized in the Jordan.
So true.
The same place where Jesus was baptized and where John the Baptist did a lot of his ministry. And so that was just a phenomenal experience in and of itself. I actually got to go to Israel.
So wait, stop right there.
Yeah.
So Jordan River, so what, did it have more of a symbolic aspect because people get baptized there, or was there something about the Jordan that really caught your attention?
I would say for me, it was more of a symbolic type of experience of, man, like, I'm getting baptized in the Jordan River. you know, just that same place where Jesus was baptized was amazing for me. I absolutely loved it.
Okay, Jordan River. What else? What else stood out?
Oh man, there's so many. I could be on
Give
this
our
show
viewers
for,
at least one
for
more.
such a long time. Okay, one more. I would say it's probably the Garden of Gethsemane. It's super peaceful. It's nothing like I thought I had envisioned before. You know, you have these thoughts of what you think it would be like, and it was completely different. It was a lot smaller actually than what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful. You have such a unique time with the Lord. I had such a unique time with the Lord, just praying and just walking around the garden and worshiping and just praying to God and what it was that He wanted for my life and just different things that He showed me on the trip. And, you know, just being in the same place where Jesus prayed was a great experience. So,
Okay. So Jordan River, the Garden of Gethsemane. Tiffany, your time. What two spots really stood out to you?
The first one that when you asked that question that popped into my mind was when we walked down from the garden, or I'm sorry, not the garden. Yes, the Garden of Gethsemane down to or the Mount of Olives. I'm so sorry. From the Mount of Olives down into the city, and we walked the road where Jesus would have walked down right before shortly before he would have been crucified. I remember just walking that and looking around and couldn't believe that I was standing in that place, but you just go, I was just overwhelmed, honestly. That's the only word that I could come up with, was just overwhelmed by being where Jesus walked, but at such a specific time when he was about to go and be crucified. You know, and face all of the trials, all that kind of stuff, you know, when he was, and so that's the first place that stood out. And then the second one, gosh, there were so many on that trip. The Eastern Wall, when we when we were overlooking the city, and when you know what the meaning is behind the Eastern Wall, when you see it, like there are graves, in front of it, but that's where Jesus is going to come when he returns, is through the Eastern Wall, so through that gate. So that one just stood out, and we have our tour group picture on the Mount of Olives overlooking that specific area.
Okay, one last question, then I'll let you get back, Daniel. So you gave us, the food, the people, some of your favorite sites. I also hear there's beautiful churches.
Oh, there is.
Was there a favorite church that you went to that is like, whoa, that was really special?
Oh man.
Is it St. Anne's Church, the one that's in the old city?
I don't know the name of it.
That's where we
but
Describe
it
it to
was
us.
the acoustics of that one.
The acoustics is really nice. I would probably say one of my favorites was when you go up to the Mount of Beatitudes. There's a church that's up there, and there's a beautiful garden surrounding the entire church, and it's a pretty small church, and a lot of people go in and they'll kind of circle around, and you can see all of the different Beatitudes throughout the church. But what was really cool is you have a lot of people from a lot of different countries and all over the world are coming to go to the Mount of Beatitudes and obviously to see other different sites. But they go and they walk around and they're all praying in their native tongue. And that was the closest thing I think I could have been to see what heaven would be like when we're all worshiping Jesus and we're all, conversing with Jesus.
Yeah.
And there we are in our native tongue, and so I thought that was really cool. And just the landscape is phenomenal. It's great.
Yeah. So cool. See? Eyewitness accounts.
Eyewitness accounts.
So
Right.
we're
Of
also
Jerusalem.
saying that as believers, if you can go to Israel and visit Jerusalem, you should go.
Do it.
You should.
Absolutely do it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna let Daniel go back, and then we're gonna because
Thank you.
I
you so much.
just had to bring him on because he literally not too long ago got back from there. So the another aspect which is ingrained in the Jerusalem assassin is the fact that Jerusalem plays an important role in the end times. And like we've been doing throughout this particular broadcast, I'm going to recommend another book that really deals with the end times, and among other things. But it's Pastor Skip's newest reprint of You Can Understand the Book of Revelation. The subtitle is Exploring Its Mystery and Message. And you can learn about Jerusalem's role in the end times through this book. Sorry, I got a little tickle in my throat.
It's important to actually read books like this and to study the Bible because, as Joel, the author of Jerusalem Assassins, even points out, his work is fiction. So while he knows biblical prophecy and what lines up biblically, he's not necessarily basing things,
Right.
what he writes here, on what the Bible says. So we still need to know what biblical prophecy is, know what that means, so that we can be watchful and prayerful, right?
That's exactly right.
And so this is a really great resource.
Great
if you
resource.
Have any questions?
Again, it's not part of the Book and
No.
Brew. The Book and Brew is Joel Rosenberg's The Jerusalem Assassin. But as we said, we're highlighting a multitude of books this time that Parchments gave us just as we walk through this program.
And I think we want to be able to give you resources as well. So if you've got questions about, because I know for me, anytime I read a book like this, it piques my interest in prophecy or where we are at, maybe in end time history, things like that. And so this is just. Look, like it says, you can understand the book of Revelation. So this is a good one
It's a great
to get.
book.
So you can learn how to understand that.
Okay, so now we're going to switch gears to the remaining few minutes we have with our viewers and look at Jerusalem in prophecy. And I'm pulling largely from an article that Randall Price wrote about this. And we're just going to talk about a few things. And Daniel, you could chime in from the things as well. But think of this, that Jerusalem is a chosen place with the divine plan throughout the ages. It's a city upon which Jesus is going to, he lived and he descended. But it's not only the center of Israeli life, in a way, it's the center of the world.
Of the world.
Everything, when something happens in Jerusalem, all of a sudden everyone, their
Everyone
attention's
takes
drawn
notice.
to it. Yeah, so
Absolutely.
So I think a peace accord plan, which is what the Jerusalem Assassin's about. But when there really is a peace accord plan, people all of a sudden start paying attention to it. Or if Israel fires a rocket or someone shows aggression towards Israel,
You hear about
we are all, our ears perk up, particularly Christians, but the world does, because it does, in a way, act as the center for the world.
It does. But don't you think there's a purpose for that?
Yes. Yeah, and let me read what Randall Price says. Given such a privileged position, it is no wonder Jerusalem is mentioned more than any other city in Scripture, more than 800 times, 660 verses in the Old and 142 in the New, and appears in 2/3 of the book of the Old Testament and almost half of the book of the New Testament. In the Bible, Jerusalem occupies a strategic position with respect to two major prophetic periods, the time of the Gentiles and the 70 weeks of Daniel. In other words, the Bible gives so much attention to Jerusalem, and then three major world religions give so much attention to the Bible. So you have, Judaism, the Old Testament, Jerusalem's the center of their world, Christianity with both the old and new, and this emphasis it places on Jerusalem. And then you have later Islam with the Quran and the emphasis they place on Jerusalem. So it's no wonder so much of the world is focused, because the three major world religions are all focused on Jerusalem.
Absolutely.
So
interesting.
Listen to this. Again, Randall Price. In case of the times of Gentile, the city prophetically marks the beginning and ending of the period that stretches from the Babylonian destruction until the second advent of Christ. So the latter half of the Old Testament all deals in one way or another with Jerusalem, God's people in God's city. And then in the first temple, at the time of Jesus, Jerusalem became the focal point of prophecy as foreign invaders sought to recapture the city. And then during Jesus' day, what did Jesus prophesy? That the temple, the heartbeat of Jerusalem was going to be destroyed. And so Jesus prophesied that the temple, again, the religious center of Jerusalem, was going to be destroyed. And then Jerusalem, was conquered, essentially again. So, or continually conquered by the Romans. So it's one of those situations that it has all of these things. But as it relates to Jesus, listen to this. He was the dedication, dialogue with teachers in the temple, tempted by the devil, confrontation with money changers. That's the signs of his messiahship. His trial and crucifixion took place, and the resurrection and ascension. So for Christians,
in Jerusalem.
all in Jerusalem, plays an incredibly important part. And then, as we pointed out, Jerusalem's destruction in 70 AD by the Romans, the 10th legion was predicted as the result of its rejection. And then Jesus predicts, thus Jerusalem's experiences, the time of end approaches to be one of the escalating times of what we now know as the tribulation, which we point out in Pastor Skip's book. You could read more about that. But bottom line, Jerusalem's important,
and we need to keep our eye on Jerusalem and pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
And pray for the peace of Jerusalem. But on that, Tiffany's going to conclude our time by reading you a section, not a section from Joel's book that's going to spoil the book for you, but a section at the end, because we both found it very poignant how Joel wraps it up. So Tiffany, let's turn to that final section to conclude our time on this, and using Joel Rosenberg's book, The Jerusalem Assassin, to really talk about what it does is it takes the role of fiction that we used at the beginning of the show and the importance of prophecy and Jerusalem, and he ties it all in a nice bow.
He does. I really appreciated how he ended this, which is, it's helpful. He starts off in this note by saying the Jerusalem Assassin is entirely a work of fiction. He does talk about how he did work for an Israeli prime minister at one point, and he has been able to travel to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to meet with and spend hours in conversation with senior Saudi officials and members of the royal family. And he's had the opportunity to meet in the Oval Office with the president, but he says right here, I want to be clear, the characters herein are made up from whole cloth figments of my fertile imagination. They are not meant in any way, shape, or form to represent real people, living or dead. The dialogue herein is also completely fictional. There are no actual quotes from any real person I may have met or read about. But what really stood out to me was the last paragraph. he closes it up by saying, "This is one of the reasons I love to tell stories. For writing a novel is not fortune-telling or prophecy. It is the act of exploring my nightmares and my dreams. It is the art of trying to capture the imaginations of readers around the world and take them into a world I hope might be one day and a world I hope never comes to pass."
Boy, if that doesn't summarize the intent of our whole program.
Exactly.
That's it.
It shows the purpose for reading fiction books.
Expands our imagination.
And
I love how he does it. The nightmares and dreams.
Isn't that so true?
Yeah.
You're an author, and I've spent a lot of time with authors who, they go back and forth of, they've said, I've had people say, I feel like I'm writing out this dream that I've had.
Yeah. So good. It's such a great, you obviously, if you're familiar with Joel's books, you need to read it. But that's such a great summary because it encapsulates everything we talked about. The importance of reading, the importance of fiction specifically, taking you to different places, giving you insight into a person's head you normally wouldn't, but also working out your dreams and nightmares. It really is a wonderful thought.
Absolutely. And I love books like this because hopefully they push us to going back to God's Word even more. Hopefully they pique your interest in going, gosh, I want to know what the Bible says about end times and how many prophecies are fulfilled that the Bible talks about. And it really is so fascinating, and I think it just helps build your faith even more when you get to dive into those and find out all about prophecies.
That's exactly right.
I remember when it was the End Time series that came out several years ago. What was it called?
Left Behind.
The Left Behind series, yes. So I remember when those were coming out, and I devoured those books when each one came out. And I was working here at the front desk and at the church, and
page turners.
Yes, and the bookstore manager, he would sneak me. I would pre-order my copy, and he'd sneak me a copy like the night before it released, and I would spend all night reading that.
That's awesome.
But what it did then was cultivate a love for me, or it cultivated in me a love for learning prophecy and going to the Bible.
Yeah. So good. It so opened up not only just a different world, it opened up Scripture, and it built in you a desire for Scripture. That's beautiful. Well, so we introduced you to a lot of books, all thanks to Parchment. We're going to summarize them, and then we're going to answer Teresa's question from early on.
Yes, we are.
But again, we referenced C.S. Lewis's The Reading Life. This is found in Parchments. And we referenced, go ahead.
The Harvest Handbook of Bible Lands.
And that gives you a lot about Jerusalem. We encourage you to pick that up.
And written by a local author.
Written by a local author,
Collins.
Dr. Stephen Collins. We referenced Skip Heitzig's You Can Understand the Book of Revelation, particularly as you want to understand the role of Jerusalem in the end time scenario in that. And then, of course, we looked at some of Tiffany's favorites, Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers. This also is found at Parchments. And then two classics.
And they have a really great classic section in Parchments. I was even just going through it earlier today as I was trying to find some of my favorites. And
and even if you're watching from not here in New Mexico, you could always get online or give Parchments a call, and they could ship a book to you. But any of these books we referenced today, we'd encourage you. But now we're going to talk about next week's book. We're leaving the fiction realm and we're getting back to nonfiction. But this is an amazing woman.
Because we're going into the biography arena this time.
That's right.
And I've been really excited about this because Brian introduced me to this woman. So, Brian, I'd love for you to get to tell us a little bit about her.
So, Lilias Trotter honestly is a superhero of the Christian faith. This woman has risen in my level of Christian heroes. For a long time, one of my favorite Christian heroes was Corrie Ten Boom. And Corrie Ten Boom, as many of you know, she was an author, a speaker, lived through the Holocaust, and she wrote the famous book, A Hiding Place. Well, all of a sudden, Lilias Trotter, after reading this book, has risen up to the Corrie Ten Boom level. Lilias was a missionary. She was an artist, a profound artist, and an author. And not to spoil too much of it, because we're going to talk about this next week, but a very, very famous man, probably the leading art critic and one of the leading artists of the day, thought that she was going to be made immortal through her art. That's how good she was. She leaves it all to go on the mission field. And the book is really broken up into two sections. Leading up to the mission field, her life as an artist, and then on the mission field and everything that transpires after it. But this lady is incredibly daring. She was cutting edge on a lot of things, like what we now know as short-term missions. She started to employ back in the 1800s. The use of art and the use of literature in tracts she was doing back in the 1800s. Not only that, Lilias Trotter was a person not only passionate about Christ, but passionate about the people she was serving. She, as a woman, with just one other or two other women, would get on camels and travel into the desert of Algeria to minister to people by themselves. No males around or anything. So and so, you know, there were some rough people at the time. So if I haven't got you excited about this book, you need to get in. She is such a fascinating character. You could delve into her art, her books, you could delve into her missionary work, but it's all wrapped up in this book called A Passion for the Impossible, The Life of Lilias Trotter. And that is next week's book. You want to make sure you read this book. And even if you're a guy going, I don't know, believe me, guys, she is a studette. She really puts a lot of guys to shame on that section. And we're going to do something a little different in that we're also going to be showing you some of her artwork. The video department has about 5 to 10 photographs that we're going to be showing of hers because she's such a rich person in what she offers. So you want to make sure you tune in next week and pick up A Passion for the Impossible. Parchments has them in. They just arrived. So you want to pick those up. Tiffany, anything you want to say in closing?
Brian has been talking about this book for several weeks since we started talking about doing book talk. So I'm very excited to get to talk about this with you all because it's someone that I've heard a lot about from Brian. So please definitely pick up this book. There are pictures in there as well, which I think pictures always just help then, you know, give us a frame of reference of what the person looked like.
Yeah.
So there are pictures in here. There are pictures of her artwork, and I think it's going to challenge us and into maybe taking steps that maybe we've never taken or gone, gosh, look how God can give somebody skills and gifts that we in our minds think, oh, she has these amazing gifts for artwork, for painting, and we think maybe she's just supposed to be this famous painter, but the Lord had such a different path for her.
Yeah.
And she was obedient to that. But the Lord still allowed her to use her artwork.
She's a fascinating character. I mean, and I say this in all honesty, Tiffany. Yeah. She reminds me of a Christian George O'Keeffe. She does. She not in her artwork necessarily, but as an artist who went to the desert. You know, Georgia went for the sake of her art. This lady goes to the desert for the sake of Christ. Sure. I mean, really is a fascinating lady on many, many levels. It's going to be a great, great book.
So don't forget, it's called A Passion for the Impossible. Okay? A Passion for the Impossible. And you can call Parchments today and you can order this and get your next set of Bruin book for the next week. So please definitely join us next week. Come with questions too. This is
interactive. We thank you for Teresa for your question.
Yes, we do. And I'm excited that we get to talk about a different format. We get to talk about a biography, you know, we get to go into the biography arena. And then even after that, you know, we don't know how long this will be lasting, but we are planning out, you know, several weeks down the line. And we've got some other really interesting books that are on the schedule
Yeah.
that I think we're
we
really
know
excited
we'll be here
about.
at least through next week with you, and then we'll go see where it goes from there. But if so, I would be happy to end with the Passion for the Impossible, just because she's so inspirational.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us on Book Talk. On behalf of Tiffany and myself, Brian Nixon, we pray God's blessing be upon you, and continue reading, because when you do, as we learned, you're going to learn about other people, but even as Christopher Smith pointed out, it teaches you to be more Christ-like.
It does.
Happy reading.
And hopefully next week we won't look like the Bobbsey twins.
Yeah, we'll make sure we don't
That
coordinate
we
so
don't
well.
match so well.
God bless you.